quite a bit better after she's gotten out of the rehab facility, the physical rehab facility. It's like, you know, normally when you get out of there, and say, okay, there was some problems. I wrote a page and a half.
No, yes.
Which
I believe so,
which
yeah.
one was it?
Granite Creek. It's about a mile from the hospital, the upper regional hospital. It's on Sky.
This is not the right one.
It's right next to the Good Samaritan. They're all located basically in the same location. Like, you know, a nurse practitioner looked at her and said, "Oh, you need paracentesis." Which is where you bring the fluids up. Oh, she made a mistake in the So like on Monday they said you need paracentesis, but they put it down. It's going to be weekly you bring it in. So for a week she's retaining all these fluids. I mean, she looked like a beach girl. So I can believe it. And the first time she went in to get these fluids drained off, it was like 9 pounds, it was 4.4 liters.
Yeah, 9 pounds. It's
And then the next week it was 3.2.
It says Julie was not here. She was absent, but over here, she is seconding a motion. I think it's the same meeting.
She writes off that doesn't help.
May not be.
Thank you.
So Thursday, I thought, you know, every time I said, so they decide she gets a hold of the nurse that made the mistake on the report. They send her over to the hospital. I have to get to the hospital. It's 5:45, bring it on the
And I adjourned the meeting, so that's not the same meeting.
He got so bad, the emergency nurse went out. He tried to see
Okay.
It doesn't seem like June 15th was that long ago. But it feels like it was a really long time
I
ago.
know. Well, it was more than 2 months. But it was a special meeting, and they may have had to do more to bring it up to our approval. Yeah. Okay. I wasn't there, so I do not put a voice in. August 4th, okay. The August 4th one is okay. That's when I did that.
I'm fine, you? Good. Is that your backup?
Just missing Mike and Claude.
Absolutely.
The 2 clocks face each other, but they're 2 minutes different.
I go by the computer clock.
I haven't heard back from her, and I don't think I will.
All right.
Jersey Radio 1.
Is that an Air Force emblem on your cap? Is that a workforce?
I'd like to call to order the September 6th, 2016 regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Gary, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could we have a roll call, please?
You certainly may. Good evening. Commissioner Lane? Here. Commissioner Sloan?
Here.
Commissioner Van Wuffen?
Here.
Vice Chair Pasiak?
Here.
And Chair Merritt.
Here. Okay, like to have a consideration to approve the August 4th, 2016 special meeting minutes. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Okay by me.
Gary? Okay, entertain a motion, please.
I move that we accept the minutes of the August 4th meeting as written.
I have a motion, to have a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to 4B, consideration of possible action to approve the June 15th, 2016 special meeting minutes. Is there any discussion or questions? I'd entertain a motion then.
I'll make a motion to approve the June 15th special meeting minutes.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carried.
Point of order, it was a regular meeting.
For the minutes.
June 15th. Either that or something, one or two.
Does say regular meeting on the draft, and in the agenda it says special meeting. Special? Okay. We'll correct the draft to say special. Okay.
Oh, this one has a second.
Yeah, I think it was a special one.
All right.
Okay, item 5, staff reports. Don't fight over it now.
None at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Okay, we'll move forward to the public hearing portion of this meeting. Any comments by the public or anybody that wants to speak will be limited to 3 minutes. And we're going to move to item 6A, consideration of possible action to hold a public hearing to recommend the town council adoption of ordinance 16-824 to rezone approximately 2.49 acres of real property located approximately 448 feet north of Road 4.5 North and approximately 1,000 feet west of State Route 89, also known as Yavapai County Assessor's Parcel Number 30605-095M, located within the northwest quarter of Section 4, Township 16 North, Range 02 West, Gila and Salt River Base and Meridian from a single-family residential 1.6 acre minimum, SR 1.6, to a single-family residential 1 acre minimum, SR 1 zoning district. The applicant is Jose Granillo. Staff is James Gardner, Associate Planner.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Commission. I'm sorry I made you read that whole thing, but I'm going to suggest that we table this item until such a time that the applicant is able to make it to the P&Z meeting, if that's amenable to the Commission.
Anybody on this commission have a problem with that?
No.
No.
Okay, so we'll move this to another time.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Oh, you need to make a motion to do so.
Okay, I'd ask a motion to push item 6A off to a later date to be announced.
I so move.
I have a motion, a second.
I'll
I second.
We have a second. Any discussion or questions?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Moving on to item 6B. Is he here?
Yes.
All right. Consideration of possible action to approve a conditional use permit for an electronic LED light emitting diode gasoline price display sign at 995 South State Route 89, Yavapai County, assessor parcel number 306290047C. The sign is to be placed on the northwest corner of State Route 89 and East Road 2 South. James?
Thank you, Commission and Chair. Before you this evening, we have a proposed CUP for an electronic sign at the Shell gas station. The subject property is on the corner, the northeast corner of Southwest. I have Road 2 South and SR 89. The zoning map is shown here. It's in a commercial light corridor right off the highway there. And as you can see, residential zoning is about 300 feet to the rear. The request is for the placement of an electronic sign on the northeast corner of State Route 89 and Road 2 South. And the sign will be part of a larger monument-style sign that's proposed to replace the existing signage on site. You may have noticed driving through town, they have started to do some of their signage. We did a separate permit for a couple of those signs, and this was pulled out of that permit and brought to you. So here's the sign package as proposed. They'll be refacing the monument-style sign and inserting that LED sign. This is the awning signage here. This is what has gone up so far. They kind of did a little wrap and put the Shell logo up. And here's the electronic sign as proposed. It's a little hard to read the dimensions here, but it's about 4 feet wide and 2 feet tall, and will be consistent of LED lights that will display the price of gas, and there will be no animation. So public outreach was done in accordance with our UDO and state law. No opposition has been received at the time of this presentation, and nobody was in attendance at the neighborhood meeting. General plan conformance, this doesn't really apply so much. The existing use is in conformance with the general plan, and we are not in a community core area here. With that, I'd welcome any questions, and the applicant is here if you have any questions for him.
Could you go back to the slide that has the actual projected image of what it would look like, please?
Yes, would you like
It was an overlay of it. Keep going. Yep, that one.
this one?
Yes.
Okay. So that little one up in the left corner is what it looks like currently.
James, how does this fit in with the sign codes that we're working on currently?
The sign codes that we're currently working on would, again, require a conditional use permit for this kind of thing. We won't be changing much of that, yeah. The only thing that we'll be looking at in our new sign code is the amount of time that each message is displayed. Yeah. So.
Does anybody have any other questions for James?
I have a question, but it's kind of generic. Is this going to be outside of the site triangle. I'm looking at the site plan and I can't really see where it's going.
It will be exactly where it is currently. It should be outside of the site triangle
Yeah.
because it was permitted that way.
Okay.
I
That's-
haven't measured, to be
That's my
frank
only
with you.
concern,
Yes.
is that with that size, it needs to be out of the site triangle so that you don't have a safety issue with transportation.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty sure it is, but I thought I ought to raise the point so that it's looked at before the permit is issued.
Absolutely, and that is something that we look into during the permitting process.
And this looks, it's a little larger, but we already have an electronic signs. I think Maverick has one, and I know Safeway has one.
That's correct, yeah. Maverick, Safeway, and I believe there's one other on the highway. I can't think of it off the top of my head, though. Circle
The high
K.
school. The
Circle
high
K and the high school, exactly. The high school has that
school.
little
Right.
flashier one, yeah. Oh, and Chino Rentals also
Looks
has
like
one.
It's quite a ways back
Yeah,
from
it should
these.
be okay.
Yeah, so, I just looked at the site plan, it does look like it's out of that site
Yeah, we were
triangle.
just studying
Yeah.
it out up here,
Mhm.
so, okay,
Yeah.
so, is that, do you want to make and add that into a motion? That it be checked out, or?
Yeah, I recommend approval of the conditional use permit with the stipulation that that it be verified that the sign is outside of the site triangle for transportation.
We kind of jumped ahead a second. Does the owner have a desire to speak to the commission? All right, so I think we're pretty all set with this one. Does any commissioner like to speak to the owner of the property? All right, so James, we have a motion here. And do we have a second on the motion?
I second.
Is there any discussion or questions? Anything we need to go over again? Annie, are you good with it?
I am.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 7, non-public hearing action items.
None at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8, discussion items. 8A, discussion of proposed sign ordinance amendments after review by council and the sign code work group.
Good evening, Commissioners. After all the work that the Commission and the public did on the sign code, we took it to Town Council. They've asked us to look at a couple of things for a second time, which we will be discussing with you this evening. Also, some additional case law and decisions that have come down from the courts since that time. So in talking about regulation of flags before read, this is the language that the town used. Flags, pennants, or insignias of any nation, state, county, town, or other political unit or any church or religious organization were exempt from regulation. I'm sorry, religious organization was exempt from regulation. And this has led to an issue with signs like these are flags that are used specifically for advertising purposes, and the conflict with Reed talking about content and content-related regulations. So when we talk about the size of signs, and that's one of the things now that based on Reed, we have to look more at the, as I say later on in this, at the back of the sign. What we can regulate is what you would see mostly at the back of the sign. So when we're talking about using these kinds of advertising flags, what sizes are we talking about? Well, this is a typical I went through several of the websites that sell these, and these are typical sizes for those sale flags that most people are using. You see them popping up and down State Route 89 right now. In terms of actual area, we're talking about 8 by 2, not so bad, 16 square feet. But when you get to a 15 by 30 by 3, you're talking about 45 square feet of signage, and 15 feet is getting pretty tall. So this is one of the reasons that we have to talk specifically about regulating flags and banners and pennants, because they first called these banners, then they called them pennants, and now they call them flags. So the regulation by name is what's causing the issue. So if we call it just a flag, they're going to say, well, this isn't really just a flag, it's a pennant too. So we want to follow the pennant regulations. So when we're crafting these, that's one of the things that we've looked at in the changes that we need to make, is talking about dimensions and not just content. So if you'll remember, what is the Reed case all about? The town of Gilbert's development code, the case erupted over some temporary directional signs. In Gilbert, if you want to do something like that, they have to be related to a qualifying event, and there are certain rules for nonprofit groups, certain rules for ideological signs, certain rules for political signs. So they had several different categories of signs that all had different sets of regulations, most of which were non-commercial speech. And that's where the problem really kind of started with Reed and the town of Gilbert, is that all non-political signs were not treated the same. So the church, the Good News Community Church, Mr. Reed was the pastor, went to the Supreme Court on the basis that this was a violation of their First Amendment rights, and that the numerous different codes did not meet strict scrutiny that's required by the Central Hudson 4-part test. So obviously, commercial flags, non-commercial flags. Commercial flags are flags that are advertising a product, just like commercial speech is advertising a product, speaking to a profit-making transaction, where the non-commercial speech really pretty much encompasses everything else. Political opinions, Happy Easter, Cardinals flag, all of those sorts of things. So strict scrutiny is, like I said, this is something that's been around for a while, and it applies to non-commercial speech, because that is the kind of speech that the First Amendment is intended to protect. So when we are talking about regulating non-commercial speech, we're talking about the government. It can't just regulate it. We have to demonstrate that there's a compelling government interest in regulating that speech, and that whatever regulations we have are narrowly tailored to regulating just that compelling government interest and nothing else. Commercial speech only has to meet the intermediate scrutiny test, and that test is just time, place, manner. Where is it, for how long, how big is it, what's it made of? So you can see the examples on the bottom are commercial speech, and they are regulated much differently than the ones at the top. So we have a raft of important Supreme Court decisions that apply to these. I'm not going to read all of these to you. If you'd like a copy of this slide and want to do a little research yourself, we'd be happy to provide it. But again, it was another Arizona case that the court developed the compelling government interest argument and the narrow tailoring to meet only that compelling government interest. So this is a quote from, oh God, I'm trying to remember which justice it was. Alito? From the Reed decision. A speech regulation targeted at a specific subject matter is content-based, even if it does not discriminate between viewpoints within that subject matter. For example, a law banning the use of sound trucks for political speech and only political speech would be content-based regulation, even if it imposed no limits on the political viewpoints that could be expressed. So everybody remembers those cars they used to drive around, you know, vote for somebody. That's exactly what they're talking about, that any regulation of political speech and not other things is a violation of the First Amendment. So we had a 6-0 decision, which is not common with the Supreme Court. Justice Thomas wrote the majority opinion with Alito, Kennedy, and Sotomayor concurring. Breyer had his own opinion in concurrence with the other three, with a few other statements that he made. And then Kagan with Ginsburg and Breyer wrote their own version of their decision. And really the most telling comment to me is the one from Kagan in the bottom right. Courts will discover that thousands of towns have such ordinances. Courts will have to invalidate one after the other. The court may find itself a veritable Supreme Board of sign review. And I don't often agree with Kagan, like almost never, but in this case I think she's exactly right. This is what's going to end up happening. I don't think that the justices always take that into consideration. So this is what we're left with essentially. Justice Alito in his comments said these are the ways that you could regulate signage still. Size, location, lighted versus unlighted, fixed versus electronic, placement on public versus private property, commercial versus residential, on-premise, off-premise, number of signs allowed per mile of roadway, time restrictions on a one-time event. This is the, Kennedy and Sotomayor also concurred with this list of, this is basically what municipalities are left with to regulate. So now when we look at flags, we look at them like this. Because content-based laws are, those that target speech based on its communicative content are presumptively unconstitutional and may be justified, again, narrowly tailored to serve a compelling state interest. So when we look at signs to regulate them now, we just look at the size, the placement, the kind, and not what it says. So Central Radio is a very interesting post-Reed decision. Central Radio got into a spat with the city of Norfolk, put up a banner that the city of Norfolk, Virginia didn't like, tried to make them take it down. They applied the same regulations to a private or commercial and non-commercial speech. And they had the exact same language again that we have concerning regulation of flags, exempting flags of nation states, and so forth. Flags that were governmental or religious in nature were exempt from regulation. And the court held that those regulations that Norfolk had were content-based regulations and subject to strict scrutiny. And the court did not buy the municipality's argument that the appearance of a community is a compelling interest. So it appears that the Reed analysis also applies to the secular, non-secular government or commercial, non-commercial flag issue. This was Susan Goodwin, who's one of the town's attorneys, gave a presentation on exactly this topic, and this is what she has surmised as a decision or as an opinion as a result of Central Radio and where the court may be heading with this. So in the newspaper, of course, we heard all about Chino Valley Nears banning signs in public space, which is not exactly what's going on. The prohibited signs right now are off-site signs unless otherwise permitted by this ordinance, more specifically signs that direct attention to a business, commodity, so on and so forth. We already exempted garage sale signs from that ordinance. The garage sale signs not exceeding 6 square feet, such signs should not be up more than 3 days. Signs may not be located at town sidewalks or within the public right-of-way. So it's not that we were doing something new, it's something that we already did. The confusion, I guess, came sprang from the idea that we were going to be regulating signage in the public right-of-way. And again, that really was nothing new. We already regulate those signs. Vehicle signs with council were another issue. There was some confusion as to what constituted a vehicle sign. And again, the proposed regulation is nearly identical to the existing regulation. The only difference is that the new regulation has taken out the last three words for advertising purposes. So other than that, that language is exactly the same. So when we're talking about vehicle signs, we're talking about signs like this and like this. Signs like this on a vehicle that are used in the ordinary course of business are not excluded. So again, we now have to think of regulating signage from the back of the sign, focus of regulations on commercial speech rather than focusing on non-public or non-commercial speech, and really not concentrate in specifics when it comes to non-commercial speech, because that's where the opposition to sign regulation will focus their attacks on what it is that existing communities are doing. And we'll touch on Chandler. Since the Reed decision, Chandler has been notified by the Goldwater Institute that they are asking for injunctive relief on behalf of a business owner in Chandler that feels that they're being treated unfairly by Chandler's sign code, and the intent is for the courts to apply Reed to commercial speech as well. So there would be very little that a community could regulate in terms of signage. So the language that we're going to have to shift to is going to be things that say otherwise regulated elsewhere in the UDO or by other local, state, or federal regulations. Commercial speech, so that's been defined as, like I said, by the Supreme Court, where the speaker is more likely to be engaged in commerce, where the intended audience is commercial or an actual or potential customer, and where the content of the message is commercial in character. So in previous cases, the Supreme Court has already ruled that commercial speech is afforded less protection under the First Amendment than non-commercial speech. That is only, again, intermediate scrutiny where non-commercial speech or private speech is subject to regulations of that sort of speech is subject to strict scrutiny. Any commercial speech that is misleading or false has no protection. So even though you have some free speech rights, you can't lie and hide behind the First Amendment. Non-commercial speech is basically speech that is expressing an opinion. It's, again, strict scrutiny, and we keep saying this because it's important to distinguish between these two categories of speech, because right now, we used to talk about content-neutral regulation, and Reed's pretty much eliminated that. So, again, this is a quick synopsis of the city of Chandler. That one's got a long way to go before it goes to the Supreme Court. We will not be holding up the next steps for the signage ordinance to wait for this to work its way to the Supreme Court. And that's all I have. Are there any questions?
The Chandler court case seems to be an intent to push commercial speech under the same protection, even though they've already said that it is not covered under the same protection?
Well, the court said in Reed that this applies to non-commercial speech. They didn't say anything about commercial speech.
Correct.
So now the Goldwater Institute is going back. They found a test case that they're going to go back to the courts and say, okay, well, if it applies to non-commercial, why does it not also apply to commercial? What's the difference between the two?
So that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll approve that. It just means they may define it more clearly.
Correct. That was one of the things. And when we go through these cases, after we read all of the briefs and everything, the lawyers analyze them. And that was one of the things that came up, and in fact, in Ms. Goodwin's presentation was, here are all the things that the court did not say. And there were several things that the court did not say or did not clarify in their decision. So now we have more court cases to clarify the things they didn't clarify the first time.
They opened up a big can.
Yes.
Does any of the commissioners have any questions? Annie?
Hypothetically speaking, I have a 15-foot tall American flagpole, and my flag is 4 by 6.
Mm-hmm.
With this ordinance, would I be allowed to fly my flag on my property?
Yes.
Would I be able to fly 2 flags?
Yes.
Would I be able to fly 3 flags?
You could probably fly 48 if you wanted,
As long as they are non-commercial.
as long as they're non-commercial in nature. Actually, I don't think we can even, strictly speaking, say that. They have to be flags, let's see, where was that? Otherwise regulated elsewhere in UDO or by other local, state, or federal regulations. Those are the only things we can apply to non-commercial speech. So if, for instance, there are federal regulations on how you have to fly the American flag. As long as you're in compliance with those, don't care.
Fantastic.
You can fly the snake one, too.
I do.
Any other questions or comments?
I just have a comment, and this is on
Pull the
the,
microphone up to you.
okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Just a comment, you were showing the
Back to the,
different banners and flags and the dimensions. Now, almost at the beginning we had.
oh, yeah.
Okay.
This one.
Yeah, that one. 15 by 3, which is a fairly large flag. Or
Right.
banner, or whatever you want to call it. 45 square feet, and the table we have for temporary signs say 48. Are we considering that? That would be 16 by 3. I'm just wondering, now that people are starting to dimensionalize what these banners and pennants and flags are, should we look at maybe reducing the maximum size?
I think what you're getting at is our maximum size doesn't allow for very much compared to this. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying how big is big, and you
Oh,
have
okay.
15 by 3 was 45 square feet, and the temporary sign table that we have says 48 square feet in the aggregate.
We could, what we could do is limit the individual size of each one of those signs and then come up with a total of 48 feet. Or we could think about something like reducing the overall allowed signage on temporary signs. Those are kind of two options
Yeah,
we could go
this
with.
is on a commercial
Yeah.
and industrial,
Mhm.
but they could have one,
One large one, or
Right.
they could have,
and as long as they have a building large enough where it's not above the roof line.
yeah.
So,
So they could have, I'm thinking, 3 of the smallest
Yeah.
ones, or 2
Yeah.
of those next biggest ones.
all right.
This chart here is just subjective anyways. It's just somebody's suggestion on what's big.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
Right, this is just, on average, these are the size,
Yeah.
the standard sizes these banners seem to come in.
So our 48 square feet's probably okay. We would just want to make sure that, again, it didn't stick up above the roof line, and it doesn't have to be 15 by 3. It could be some other dimension.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They could do it horizontally rather than vertically.
Okay,
No, thank you for pointing that out, though.
yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
I do, actually. At the council meeting, one of the council members brought up that his trailer is parked for pancake breakfast.
Correct.
Is that going to be, how will that be affected?
So you would not, because the purpose of that is, that goes back to these signs here-ish, here.
Mm-hmm.
These would not be allowed, and strictly speaking, they're not allowed now. I think we have, I'm pretty sure we have an exemption for municipal activities. But for this, we would have, they would have to find a different way to do it. They wouldn't be able to put it out just on a trailer. Because really, I don't think, well,
Is the pancake breakfast going to be considered commercial because
It's a nonprofit.
it's a nonprofit community
Right.
service?
yeah, I think that that would be the route we would take, that this is not for, it's a nonprofit. It's not, come every morning and have pancakes. It's a one-time event, so it would be considered a temporary sign rather than permanent signage. Here, we're talking about permanent signage, and so maybe the election one isn't the greatest example, but we've all seen these before where you have a semi with a big sign parked in the middle of a field.
Right.
Fantastic.
There's one near the roundabout.
Yes. The intent
Again?
is to circumvent the sign code is what the intent is. So,
Which roundabout?
Alvarez Tire.
I'll have to go down there.
Say hello to the horses.
I will.
they, the pancake breakfast trailer, because it is considered a non-commercial, not a money-making venture, would not be regulated under the commercial content.
It would not be regulated by commercial content because it's a one-time event.
Okay.
And that's where we're talking about regulations of time. It's a one-time event, that's fine.
Did that satisfy him?
I think council will agree with that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I do have a question because I can't remember a lot of things that I read. The temporary signs, we are going to enforce a time limit on them?
Correct.
Of like
That's
3 days or something like that?
I believe it is 3 days that can go up 24 hours before the event and has to come back down 24 hours after.
Okay. I have a question about a structure that's up around the new roundabout at Perkinsville.
Uh-huh.
It's, I don't even know what the business is. I think it's agricultural. But they have two old trailers, tractor trailers, parked with an awning. They're using them as walls.
Right.
But these tractor trailers have words and things like that on them.
Those,
Where would that fall, I guess is my question.
because most of the text is obscured from public view, they generally have things parked in there. You can't see what it says. You might be able to see a word.
Mhm.
We
Okay.
wouldn't consider that signage. They did have those parked out on the highway without the roof, facing the highway, and staff said, no, you can't do that. Those have got to be moved.
Okay.
So that's what they did with them instead.
Too bad they can't paint them, but okay. Thank you.
Did we figure out a time frame for moving signs, illuminated signs?
I'm sorry.
We
okay,
did, I think it was 6
Is that what we agreed on? 6 seconds?
seconds. That was a national standard, I believe.
That sound right? Yes.
That was in our discussion. In fact, that was one of the things we had some confusion on. We really thought we had to nail that down a little bit. So. Now, we'll be getting another shot at this again after you've,
I believe James has distributed copies of the updated amendment. You should all have copies of that. If you have comments regarding those, please get them back to us. We will not be reconsidering. This is our chance to talk about these. We will not be, the language that we have in there now is what we've discussed with the town's attorney, so we will not be bringing it back to P&Z to hash out new language. Based on what council's feedback was and based on the attorney's knowledge of the Gilbert case. Gilbert used to, she represented Gilbert at one point. So she's very familiar with that case, and that's why she's very sensitive about not being the test case for a post-Reed decision. It was not inexpensive.
Will this new sign code change change, for example, Chino rental sign or the high school signs, those
No.
remain?
Anything that's there now, if it does not conform to this, is a legal non-conforming use.
Until it needs to be rebuilt?
Right. They can't make it bigger, but they can continue to use it and maintain it in its current state.
Most of this wordage we've already looked at and
Yes.
approved.
Yeah.
Can you spot anything in here that was changed by the legal department that we should talk about? This is a lot of information for us to.
Yeah, it is a
go
lot of
over.
information for you to consider now. That's why we wanted to bring it to you. If you have comments, let us know, or questions. Most of it is just wordsmithing.
Kind of off the top of my head, so. We further defined electronic sign to be a little more clear about it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. If you take a look at 4.21.2G, exempt signs, we've modified that table to remove the mention of flags other than government signs and flags. So government signs and flags are allowed without permit, and there's no limit on that. So that's a substantial change from last time we talked about this.
What
And
page is that on, John?
That is on, I believe it's on page 9. It was the last time I looked at it. Yeah, it is.
Okay, that's what I thought I saw.
And it's right there at the bottom in the table. So. And our attorney basically says if we put it in the government section, we should be okay and not raise any red flags.
What
Pun
about
intended.
historical signs?
Historical signs, can you give me an example of one in town?
Macy's changes their signs, or
Macy's.
their flags quite a bit to represent historical events. Would those be affected?
That would just need a,
Pardon me?
It's a non-commercial flag.
It is a, yeah, they.
they're not really trying to bring in business with
No,
those flags.
it's more
so, yeah,
acknowledgement.
Yeah, so those would be exempt as well, yeah.
So the key word is commercial. If it's gonna make money, draw people in, or boost sales, then that's gonna be regulated.
To a more strict degree, yes, that's
Okay.
correct, yeah. Those are the substantial changes from, yeah, everything else is kind of just wordsmithing.
We've been over this so many times, it's hard to remember everything. But I think Annie got the key thing answered. We can fly the American flag, and you can't stop us from doing that.
Exactly.
As high and
Which
as
was
big
never
as
our
we want
intent.
it.
Okay.
All right.
Hopefully that'll make the papers.
Doubtful.
We can give them a call.
Yeah. Along with the garage sale signs.
Okay.
Is there any other questions or comments or?
Thank
anything
you
you
for
need to
Thank you.
talk?
everything.
Yep. I know it's been a
Yep.
lot of work.
Appreciate your patience there, James.
Absolutely, and you've been great throughout this process, so thank you.
Well, we're well paid. Okay. All right, so we've beat item 8A enough. Moving on to item 9, any public comments? Seeing as how we have one public person here, would you like to say something that's not on the agenda tonight? All right. The public has had their opportunity. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Got a motion?
I'll second.
Got a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Commission.
And it's still day.